Target 9.3, limiting reactant. The reactants are what you start with on the left side of the equation. The products are what you end up with on the right side of the equation. The types of problems that will be of the limiting reactant type will give you the amounts of both of your reactants and ask you how much product is formed. First step to a limiting reactant problem is figuring out which one is going to control the amount of product made. One of your reactants will always run out first, and that is the one that will control the amount of product made, and that will be your limiting reactant. For example, if you had 1 loaf of bread, 2 full jars of peanut butter, which one would limit the number of sandwiches you could make? The amount of bread or the peanut butter? Well, clearly, if you had this amount of bread, you would run out of bread before you would run out of peanut butter. When the bread was all gone, no more sandwiches could be made. So in this case, the bread is your limiting reactant. It controls the number of sandwiches that could be made. Peanut butter is your excess reactant. You will have peanut butter left over when the bread is all gone. So limiting reactant is the reactant that gets used up first. It controls the amount of product that gets made, and the reaction stops when it is used up. That's your bread in the example. The excess reactant is the one that's left over when the limiting reactant runs out. The problems you will be given both amounts of your reactants. You'll be asked how much product is made, which one is the limiting reactant, and then you'll be asked how much excess reactant is left over. So we'll go through this step by step first with mole-to-mole problems, and then we'll go through mass to mass. For example, given this balanced equation, 2 moles of hydrogen react with 1 mole of oxygen to make 2 moles of water. But unfortunately, we never just have 2 moles and 1 mole. It never works out like that. We have odd numbers. For example, let's say we had 5 moles of hydrogen and 4 moles of oxygen. Each molecule can represent 1 mole. If we had 5 moles of hydrogen and 4 moles of oxygen, which one would run out first? Which one is your limiting reactant? Let's see, if we assemble the water molecules based on what we have here, it would look like this. All of our hydrogens would be used, and we would be left with 1.5 moles of oxygen. Your hydrogen in this case is your limiting reactant, your oxygen is your excess, and you have 1.5 moles left over. It's easy to see that when you have a picture and you can just manipulate. How do you do it if you don't have a picture? Well, let's look at this same problem, but let's just do it on paper without pictures. If 5 moles of hydrogen are combined with 4 moles of oxygen, A, which is a limiting reactant, B, how many moles of water will be made, and C, how many moles of the excess reactant will be left. We'll tackle A and B together. Here are the steps. First, calculate the amount of product that can be made from each of the given reactants. We're going to do 2 mole-to-mole problems and see which one makes the least amount. The one that makes the least amount is the limiting reactant, and it determines how much product is made. So for example, we will take the 5 moles of hydrogen and we will calculate from 5 moles of hydrogen how much water can be made. We'll do the same thing with 4 moles of oxygen. We'll calculate how much water can be made. Whichever one of these two that gives us the lowest amount is the correct answer for limiting reactant. So we're given 5 moles of H, 2 moles of water to 2 moles of H2 gives us 5 moles of water. Take our other given, which is 4 moles of oxygen. 4 moles of oxygen, 2 moles of H2O to 1 mole of O2. These are your coefficients. 2 moles of H2O to 1 mole of O2. 8 moles of water. So if you had all 4 moles of oxygen used up, you would produce 8 moles of water. If you had all 5 moles of hydrogen used up, you'd produce 5 moles of water. 5 is less than 8. Therefore, this is the amount of water that is produced. And hydrogen is your limiting reactant. If hydrogen is your limiting reactant, then oxygen is your excess reactant. So, the answer to this problem gives us both of the answers that we're looking for. How many moles of excess is left over? Well, we've already determined that hydrogen is our limiting reactant and oxygen is our excess reactant. So we will do a problem based on that. Go from hydrogen to oxygen and see how much is used. You will subtract that from how much was given in the problem, how much you had in the first place, and that'll give you how much was left. So we were given that we had 5 moles of hydrogen, and we're starting with 5 moles of hydrogen because that was our limiting reactant. We're going to go to our excess, which was oxygen. It's 1 mole of oxygen for 2 moles of hydrogen. So 1 mole of O2 to 2 moles of H2. That gives us that 2.5 moles of O2 were used. When we used all 5 moles of hydrogen, we used 2.5 moles of O2. How much O2 do we have? Well, let's look back at our problem. We had 4 moles of O2. That was given in the problem. So we had 4 moles. We subtract what we used, which was 2.5 moles, equals 1.5 moles left. And that's our answer, 1.5 moles left over.